Started tonight, page number 298. Only trust Him. Only trust Him. Come, every soul by sin oppressed, there's mercy with the Lord, and He will surely give you rest by trusting in His word. Only trust Him, only trust Him, only trust Him now. He will save you, He will save you, He will save you now. For Jesus shed His precious blood, rich blessings to bestow. Flow into the crimson flood that washes white as snow. Only trust Him, only trust Him, only trust Him now. He will save you, He will save you, He will save you now. Yes, Jesus is the truth, the way that leads you into rest. Believe in Him without delay, and you are fully blessed. Only trust Him, only trust Him, only trust Him now. He will save you, He will save you, He will save you now. Good truth right there. He will save you now. Brother Jordan, could you make sure you're not too distracted by the cars playing over there? I see my son has brought his bag half full of cars. So.
Well, I won't light for entertainment.
There's plenty to go around if we had to, but.
Just so long he doesn't want you to build a garage to house all these cars.
That's just the hem of the garment right there.
Oh, yeah.
I took a video the other day. I was just like, how many monster trucks do my boys have? I mean, really, it's William, but Duncan's gotten a few recently. And so I lined them all up, and I took a video of it, and I thought I had them all. Literally walk into the next room, showed William the video, and he looks down, he's like, oh, Daddy, you missed one. Picks up another monster truck off the floor. I'm just like, yeah, we probably missed more than one. Cars, and more cars. We had a man at our previous church we were at. He got William hooked on cars, and every time he came to church, he'd have a car in his pocket, a Hot Wheel for William, to the point William just walked up and was just like. And sometimes he was going home with two. It just, it varied. So sometimes it was a brand new one, sometimes it was an old one, and he didn't care. It was a Hot Wheel. All right, Genesis chapter 30. We're going to look at some business dealings with Laban. Business dealings with Laban. And let's start there in verse 25. We'll go 25 down to 36. It says, and God remembered, I'm reading 22. Let's get 25. There we go. And it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said unto Laban, send me away, that I may go unto mine own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served thee, and let me go, for thou knowest my service which I have done thee. And Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry, for I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. And he said, appoint me thy wages, and I will give it. And he said unto him, thou knowest how I have served thee, and how thy cattle was with me. For I was little, which thou hast before I came, and it is now increased with a multitude. And the Lord hath blessed thee since my coming, and now when shall I provide for mine own house also? And he said, what shall I give thee? And Jacob said, thou shalt not give me anything. If thou wilt do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep thy flock. I will pass through all thy flock today, removing from thence all the speckled and spotted cattle, and all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and if such shall be my hire, so shall my righteousness answer for me in time to come, when it shall come for my hire before thy face. I just have to say, that phrase right there, I forgot to put it in my notes. I was reading along and I saw that. So shall my righteousness answer for me. I don't know about you, but I find that quite comical with Jacob saying, so shall my righteousness answer for me. He's not been a real righteous man.
This is what he's planning on doing.
Yeah, with everything that has transpired. And we'll get to that, Brother Carl. It's interesting what takes place. But my goodness, it's like, 14 years have gone by. Have we quickly so forgotten what you did to your brother and, and all of that? Okay. So shall my righteousness answer for me in time to come, when it shall come for my hire before thy face, every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and brown among the sheep, and shall be counted stolen with me. And Laban said, behold, I would it might be according to thy word. And he removed that day the he-goats that were ring-straked and spotted, and all the she-goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had some white in it, and all the brown among the sheep, and gave them into the hand of his sons. And he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. Let's go to God in a word of prayer this evening. Lord, we ask you for wisdom as we look into this passage, and God, help us to learn something from your word that would be applicable to us, and being careful with business dealings and coming together with things, Lord. And we just ask you bless our time tonight in Jesus' name. Amen. Last week I ended with something, and then as soon as I read verse 25 in preparation for this, I thought, maybe, this is what it looks like. All those sons, all these 11 kids, I believe it's 11 boys, 12 and one girl, 12 kids. These 12 kids that have just been born, with maybe the exception of Dinah, but it appears that Joseph is one of the last ones to be born. There in verse 25 it says, and it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said unto Laban. The impression I have here is 7 years has gone by. That's a lot of kids. I mean, that's between 4 women, all right? This isn't just one person giving birth to all these kids. But the impression I have here is that all these kids were born in a 7-year period, and now the 7 years is up, and why would he come to Laban asking for a change in his wages at this point? Throwing it out there. Why would he ask for a change in his wages?
He's wanting to move.
Well, he's wanting to move. Why can he move? What has happened? He's
got 7 more years to deal with.
He's fulfilled it. That's why I'm not trying to trick y'all. He's been here for 14 years. Okay, 7 for Leah and 7 for Rachel. Jump over to chapter 31, look in verse 41. It says, thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle. And in those times, 6 years, and thou hast changed my wages 10 times. He changed the agreement 10 times in 6 years. And from what I gather in chapter 30 here, we're at the beginning of this 6-year period. No wonder he was so burnt out at the end of 6 years, because man, he just 14 long years to marry these ladies, and we see how those last 7 years went. Just quite a mess of women fighting over one man, and that's what happened. That's what exactly was going on. And so here now he's at the start of 6 years, and his wages are going to get changed 10 times. He gets burnt out. But that's why, to me, it appears that all his children are born in this second 7-year period, with the exception of Benjamin. Benjamin is the only one who's born later in the promised land where he's supposed to be. But all of his other kids are born back here with Laban in that land. Look there in verse 27. Jacob's ready to go home. He's probably, 14 years have gone by. He's hoping, hey, my brother, his anger is past. He hasn't heard boo from mom. Mom said she was going to send for him. And he's probably thinking, well, man, I hope I can come home by now. And so he thought, well, I've served my time. I've got my wives. Time to head home. And Laban doesn't want to do it. Look at verse 27. And Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I found favor in thine eyes, tarry, for I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. Find it interesting. Laban doesn't want to serve Jacob's God, but he sure enjoys the blessings from Jacob's God. So Laban has very equivocated, realizes that Jacob equals blessings. And he's like, hey, he knows, in his mind, Jacob's the honeypot, right? And if he goes, honeypot goes, I got nothing. I'm enjoying these blessings with him being here. And so he's asking him, hey, you know what? What do you want? Appoint thy wages and I will give it. Right there. Appoint thy wages and I'll give it. He said, hey, you know what? You got my daughters. All right, now time to actually pay you for working for me. And so he tells Jacob, all right, appoint your wages. What do you want? So Jacob asks for a certain kind of cattle. All right. He decides that, hey, I'd like to have some cattle. He's been working with cattle for 14 years. I'm sure he did it with his dad. He's been doing it with Laban, taking care of Laban's cattle for 14 years. So he tells Laban, he says, look, this is what I'd like to have. And they put a speculation on it. He's like, look, I'm going to go through all the flocks. Anything that is speckled and spotted and brown among the cattle, among the sheep, speckled, spotted among the goats. I'm going to take those. Those will be mine, and you'll have everything else. And that's what Jacob asked for. He splits up the herd, and he's going to oversee Laban's herd. Laban takes a set kind, while Jacob takes the other. What's interesting to note, I think, with this right here, Laban recognized who was causing the blessings to come to him. Right? He said, hey, Jacob, ever since he's been here, I've been getting great blessings. Oh, would that be said of us? And I hope when you were, I know some of you are retired, you're not in the workforce, but anybody that goes out in the workforce, I hope it's said of them, man, we don't want to let them go. I hope that any company that you've worked for and any company that any Christian works for, they realize that person blesses our company. And it should be twofold. It should be one. You should be one of their better workers. The Bible instructs us that we should do the best to our ability. All right. Now, we got to be careful. Don't compare yourself to others, because sometimes some people, they just can work a little better than you. I had guys I worked with that were kind of comical to me. They would try to, well, doesn't the Bible say something about... And I said, yeah, it talks about doing your best heartily to the Lord. I said, it doesn't talk about... I said, you're assuming he's not doing his best. I said, you It's someone doing their best for God, not just, be a hard worker, because that's your private interpretation. But we should be doing our best for the Lord for that company, whoever it is we're working for. And hopefully after some time there that the higher ups realize, hey, that's a valuable employee. That's not someone we want to let go. And they realize the value of having you around because, you're a worker. You're good at what you do. You want to learn. When I work construction, I was just like, hey, let me learn what I can so I can improve, so I can be a more valuable, Well, for starters, I didn't want to be pounding stakes in the ground for 11 years straight. I wanted to move past that at some point and not do all the back-breaking work of a laborer. So it's like, hey, I want to move up and be doing some of the carpentry work. But then the other side was, hey, I want to be valuable to the company. I don't want to just be someone who can only do grunt work. I want to be able to, use my brain and help and assist and be valuable. And that should be our goal. And you know what? The God of Jacob is our God today. Now Jacob's blessings was because he's the grandchild of Abraham, right? That's what it is. He's the grandchild of Abraham. That's why God blessed him. God blesses us because we're his child. And God does have good things for us in mind. He wants good things for us. And so, man, we're willing to work and do our best. And hey, Lord, what is it you'd have me to do? God's going to bless that effort. Look at verse 36. I thought this was an interesting note. It says, and he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. What's so interesting about that right there? What's different in verse 36 from the beginning of the verses that we read? 25, 28. What's the difference between 36 and 28?
Separated into 2 flocks.
Jacob now has his own flock, doesn't he? You realize Jacob inherited a flock and he doesn't even get to look after his own flock? He still, what does it say? And Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flock. He's got to get servants to watch his flock so he can continue to watch Laban's flock. I think he had a hand in his own flock, but the reality is he had to put more time and energy into taking care of Laban's than he could have even taken care of his own. He had to have other servants, and we'll see here he inherits some servants, but he had to have his own servants take care of his. He couldn't even take care of them. He had to take care of Laban's still. For the next 6 years, he's working more on Laban's. And if we got into chapter 31, I believe he says in the cold of the night and the heat of the day, it didn't matter. Like he was responsible for Laban's for Laban's goods, whether it was nighttime or daytime. He was the one that was held responsible every time. The man had no rest. He just constant work. And man, if there was a problem, well, go get Jacob. He'll be able to solve it. And Laban had it pretty good when Jacob was in town, taking care of all his stuff. Look there in verse 37. And Jacob took him rods of green poplar and of the hazel and chestnut tree, and pilled white strakes in them, and made the white appear which was in the rods. And he set the rods which he had pilled before the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs, when the flocks came to drink, that they could conceive, and when they came to drink. And the flocks conceived before the rods, and brought forth cattle, ring-straked, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob did separate the lambs, and set the faces of the flocks toward the ring-straked, and all the brown in the flock of Laban, and he put his own flocks by themselves, and put them not unto Laban's cattle. And it came to pass, whensoever the stronger cattle did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the cattle were feeble, he put them not in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. And the man increased exceedingly, and had much cattle, and maidservants, and men servants, and camels, and asses. So, we have this weird situation. I've always thought this was weird. Jacob's taking these rods, he's pilling them, letting the white show. Brother Watkins, you ever do anything like this? Brother Tony, is this familiar? Yeah. It's funny, if you read commentaries, you get one that'll be like, oh man, back in the day, they used to do this. And then you read somebody else and they're like, I tried this didn't work. I think this is just like the mandrakes that we read previously. It's some old tale of, oh man, if you do this, this will happen. But what's the reality of what's really going on? I mean, is it really happening that, they conceive and then Jacob brings these rods and he pills them, and the stronger cattle, because they're amongst these rods, when they give birth, all the cattle are ring-straight, speckled, and spotted. And all the weaker cattle, he doesn't put them there, and they just so happen to not be that way, so they get to be Laban's. Is this some little voodoo magic that Jacob learned, and hey, we're working on this? I don't think so. I think God puts it in there to show us what Jacob is trying to do, which it does appear that he's at his old tricks trying to connive and scheme, right? I'm gonna make sure I get the strong cattle, and I'm gonna make sure Uncle Laban gets the weak cattle. But the reality is, God is the one who opens and closes the womb. God is the one who decides this cattle is ring-straight, speckled, and spotted, and this cattle is not. This sheep is ring-straight, speckled, and spotted, but this sheep is not. And so God chose to give Jacob all of the strong cattle, and he chose to give Laban all of the weak cattle. That's just the bottom line. This is not a situation of, oh man, Jacob connived and schemed and figured out how best to do this. No, God decided to bless Jacob, just like Jacob has been always getting the blessings, right? God has been blessing Jacob. He blessed Jacob for 14 years. Now, Jacob wasn't getting cattle during that time. He got an abundance of children in the last 7 years. He got a blessing of having, should have just kept his one wife, but he got more and had a bunch of children. But God was blessing his labor. Everything he did, man, he's got like the magic touch, turns to gold. And Laban's just like, man, I want you to stick around. But now all of a sudden, Jacob is actually getting paid cattle, and surprise, surprise, all the cattle that he should be getting paid are the very strong, healthy cattle, and Laban's getting the weak cattle. This is not some magical thing he's doing, I believe. I believe it's God blessing Jacob because he's got the blessing of Abraham upon his life. And so his cattle is going to be good. His cattle is going to be better. Look at verse 31 here. And this is something to realize that even we do this, okay? Our perception of a situation may vary depending on the angle of how we see it and who is there and all of that. 31 verse 1 says, and he heard the words of Laban's son saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all his glory. Okay? Well, did Jacob really do that? Did Jacob steal from his uncle? No, he brought a plan before his uncle and said, hey, here's a business proposition. Will you do this? This is what I'd like. And his uncle said, yeah, that sounds great. Go ahead and do it. Jacob's eyes, he's looking at this. Jacob's looking at everything for the last 6 years now. This is verse 1 of chapter 31 is 6 years later. Jacob is looking backwards 6 years, and he believes he was doing Laban a service. And he's just being rewarded for taking care of his flock. But then you've got Laban's sons who are looking at what Jacob has been doing, and they believe that he's robbing their dad. Which, okay, if they believe in this superstition of, I'll put the pilled strakes in front of the cattle and they're going to give birth to stronger, they're going to have this special defect, and, yeah, if they see him doing that, I get where their perception is, you're trying to steal from our dad. You're not just letting everything happen naturally. You're trying to, on purpose, make sure you get this speckled and spotted cattle. So you're putting the strong ones in this special place to give birth, which would give you speckled and spotted, which the reality is, no, God decides what's speckled and spotted. Not some pilled strake that he put in the ground. But something to realize and learn from this is how we view a situation could be different depending on our perception of a situation, and then two, when I say the angle, you think about it, if you see an object, one person can look at it. I've seen objects where you can look at it one way and it looks like one thing, but then if you look at it from way over here, it looks totally different. Anybody ever see that? Like you look at it one way and it looks like a man, and then you walk all the way to the other side and look at the object again and it says, I love you. And yeah, I know, it's funny because you're like, whoa, how does that even work? But some artist figured out how to, the right angles, okay? Well, that happens in life. Two people could look at a situation or a scenario or circumstances happening, and they both come to two totally different conclusions. And we need to be careful, and when that happens to us, when we're in that, sometimes it's a conflict. We need to realize that just because I saw it a certain way doesn't necessarily make me right. Because often we like to believe, hey, I'm right. No one likes being wrong, right? Nobody does. We all want to be right. But sometimes we look at a situation and we're like, well, no, I know I'm right in this. And, well, look at it from their angle, from their viewpoint. Sometimes we've got to take that into consideration and understand that others may have a different angle on what took place, and just because we see it one way doesn't necessarily make that right or wrong. That makes it our viewpoint. That's often, hey, our upbringing affects that. How we view the world affects that. Our opinions affect that. And like this situation here, man, Jacob's looking at it going, hey, I've worked hard. I deserve to have good cattle. What's wrong with me getting the strong ones? And then his sons are looking at it going, man, you're taking care of dad's stuff, but then you're doing these special things to make sure you get the good ones. And so you got two different things here going on. Last thing I want to look at is this whole business dealing here. Let me say one more thing about Laban and Jacob and his sons. I don't know exactly. We don't see a lot of what's going on here with Jacob, but we do know Jacob is a conniver and a deceiver, right? He's that way with his brother. I mean, my goodness, if he's gonna pull the stunts that he pulled on his brother, his own family, then what would he do to somebody he doesn't really know? And I'm sure that over the last 20 years, Jacob has pulled some stuff on people to make the sons of Laban think you don't have dad's best interest at heart. Because Jacob is a deceiver. And what you got a deceiver and a deceiver. Uncle Laban's a deceiver too, because Uncle Laban pulled a fast one on Jacob with the daughters. You got two guys trying to pull fast ones on each other. Now, I don't know if that's what Jacob's initial intent was when he first came to Laban. It appears that it was somewhat honorable, but I don't know his heart, and Scripture doesn't tell us one way or the other. But I understand where his Laban's sons may have been looking at it and going, man, Jacob's he's robbing our dad. Our father is going to be left with nothing, the glory of dad's glory of stuff, and it's their inheritance too they're looking at. They're seeing dad losing the strong cattle, and they're like, this is our inheritance, we get the weak cattle. When we go into business dealings, something like this, or even just other things, to the best of our ability, we should make sure that the deal that we're going into business with is good for both parties. something I've been learning over the last few years is, you know what? A good deal is when both parties win. When both parties make out. You ever gone into a business dealing and you didn't make out so good, but the other party made out real well? And you realized afterwards that they were just looking out for their best interest and they were trying to get as much as they could and was trying to give you as little as possible. That's never a good business deal. And yeah, that person may think it was because, man, they got all kinds of stuff, but man, it's going to come back and bite them because you're not trying to think of everybody involved. The best type of business deals are when both parties win. So Jacob here, why does Jacob feel jilted? Well, I think he feels jilted because Laban has not showed himself to be an honest man, right? Laban tricked him over the daughters. So Jacob thinks he's jilted. So Jacob thinks, hey, it's okay for me to try to pull a fast one on Laban. It's okay if I get one over on him. And Laban, well, the sons of Laban, they feel jilted because Jacob's a conniver and a deceiver. So when things start going bad for Dad, they're like, it's Jacob's fault. He's the one that's taking care of Dad's stuff. And so, the original intent here, it may have been good, but if you ever go into business dealings, try to make sure that both parties win. Try to make sure it's good for both parties, not just, well, what can I get out of it? I know that you want what's good for you. You want, hey, I want to get rewarded, but make sure that it's a good business deal for both parties and not just for yourself. And that's with anything. I mean, I know I've talked with, even when it's getting in contract with like a solar deal, okay? I know these guys, we talked to several people when we lived in Fort Worth. They come in and they're like, yeah, we're going to set up solar panels on your roof and you're going to do this and you're going to do this. And I know some of you know what that's like. And it's just, we did some digging into it, and there was one company we talked to. He was like, oh yeah, you're going to save money and this and that. And come to find out, like, his projection of me saving money is that I was spending several $100s a month on power. And I went, I don't spend several $100s a month on power. And he's like, oh, no. And I showed him. I'm like, this is how much I spend in a year. And I could do the math. I did the math for him. I said, I spend this much in a year. He's like, are you serious? Like, yeah. Like, we try to be frugal with what we got. And, like, what I spent was not even close to what his projections were that we should be spending. And what it came down to was, it's not worth it for us to get your solar panels, because by the time we're done paying for the solar panels, and then, of course, then they always throw in the, oh, well, you can always sell it back to the company. And I just looked at them, I said, oh, so they're going to buy it for what I would pay for it? Oh, no, they're not going to do that. I said, yeah, no, forget it. But that right there, he's looking out for them, but he's not looking out for us. He makes it look like he's looking out for us, but the reality is he's not being upfront telling us all the information. I've had that happen where I had a deal happen one time where I bought into something and I thought, I asked questions, and I can't honestly say if the guy knew what I was referring to, but he just took it at face value. He took what I said and was like, oh yeah, that's right. But that's not what I meant, and how he was answering were two totally different things. And whether he caught onto that or not, I don't know, because he was a salesman trying to sell me something. And it was a situation where I was like, kind of a bad deal for me. It's not what I was looking for. Didn't lose out completely. It's just a matter of like, I'm just going to have to wait several years before I actually get the value of what this thing is that I bought. And so, best to make sure to be, in order to be honest with somebody and have a good conscience, try to make sure that the deal is good for both parties. And so Jacob here, well, hopefully he was trying to be honest, but he's got a track record. He's got a track record here of not doing that. And Laban, of course, he's got a track record too with Jacob. And so these guys, nobody can trust anybody, all right? I mean, these guys, they might have well had a 50-page document with a signature on every page, but it really wouldn't have mattered because, there's that fine print in there somewhere that somebody snuck in that no one knew about. And, but good deals. And lastly, just with Jacob, man, be a good worker so that people can see God's blessing on you and that you can bless, wherever you're working and doing, man, do your best for the Lord. And that's something that if we can put that into practice, realizing whatever I do, whether it's ministry service for God or even just, taking care of my house or working a job, one of the things that helps with working a secular job is, hey, if I do this for the Lord, then I know I'm trying to please Him before I please the boss. Because you can't always please the boss. And Mrs. Watkins over there, she's always trying to please the boss, right? But sometimes he's just like, nope, we're going for another hour, even though she's been all day in that tractor. But if we do it for the Lord, well, then we know, hey, I've done my best for Him. It pleases Him. Hopefully, the boss will be pleased too with it as well. And so, do your best for Him. I'm going to make mention of this because I had this thought, and we're gonna get into it next week. But something we're going to notice with Jacob next week. He's always running from something. He's rarely ever running to something. The first time we see him running is he's running from Esau. And we're going to see here in this next chapter, he's running from Laban. Jacob is constantly, he's not running to something, he's running from something. And that's two different mindsets. Two different mindsets. And we need to make sure we don't have that. We'll get into that next week. Anybody got any questions or comments on those verses there? All right. William, do you have any more prayer lists?